day 3 of the July 98 7-day retreat in Springwater. Three topics stand out in the mind. One is judgment, another forgiveness, and another responsibility. Don't know how far we'll get with any one of them, but there will be more talks after tomorrow, if by then we haven't all forgotten. Which happens too, thank goodness. Judgment. Many people report this. In every retreat, wherever they are held, realizing how judgmental we are. Almost inevitably or incorrigibly judgmental. This is how the feeling goes. And realizing that somehow this judgmentalness gets in the way of simple being, simple listening and attending. And wondering whether it is humanly possible to see and perceive without judgment. Of course, being the way we are, we want to get rid of anything that is in the way, for the time being, as we feel it's in the way. But the first step is always, isn't it, what is this thing we call judgment? What is going on? Not just I'm aware of judging. I'm aware that with every perception comes a judgment. I like this, I don't like this. This is better, this is worse. Judging people, judging oneself, judging things and ideas. Being aware of it, realizing that this is going on, is the first step. But there is something deeper than judging. Where does judgment come from? What feeds it and nourishes it and maintains it? Because we can say it's habit, which it is, habitually judging. One has heard judgment all one's life. Obviously, oneself was judged from day one. Maybe already inside, women say how unruly this baby is, or how good, or quiet, or active. Well, wait a minute. To say that a baby is active, is that a judgment or is that a fact? That's where sometimes confusion comes in. Describing as accurately as possible with the words at our disposal what is going on need not be judgmental. So one can check, is what is being said or commented just a description in words of what one sees? Or is there a, I don't like this, or this would be better, or this would be worse? A taking position in regard to it, based on one's entire background of what one knows and likes and has learned to know and has learned to like. These things don't come just out of, we think it all comes out of me. It gets involved right away the moment we touch upon something. We've learned from our parents, our teachers, whoever we've associated with, the books, the heroes, the movies, what to like and what not to like, what is right and what is wrong, what should be done and what should not be done, depending on the group in which we grew up. There are different standards for different groups. And according to that comes automatic, habitual judgment. This is good, this is bad. What we are doing is better than what they are doing. But there's a lot involved in that already, isn't there, worthy to be looked at in this judging. What accrues to this organism through judging others, oneself? The moment we judge something as good or wrong, we establish or maintain a position, don't we, as one who knows what is good and knows what is wrong. And being in the know about what is right and wrong, just taking simple things, judgment is infinite. Being in the know about what is being judged gives us some kind of a position, strength. We think the eyes of others, but at least in our own inner eyes. Or, as somebody this morning said, there's always a little imaginary audience there to whom we're addressing ourselves, talking to, commenting to this little audience, sometimes a big audience. So let's watch it, whether as we become aware of judging, not to say, oh, I shouldn't be judging, but what is going on in judging? Because the whole organism is involved in everything that's going on, energy-wise. It garners energy from thoughts, positive thoughts, negative thoughts, thoughts of being a good judge, knowing better, being in the know. It gives rewarding energies. Because a picture of myself with some kind of stability of knowing what is right and wrong is being fed all the time, or diminished when someone else judges me, diminishes the picture or cuts off the energy supply of feeling positive about myself, good, interesting, important. Deep down in every human being, probably, should never make sweeping generalizations, but we can always check it out for ourselves, is a conditioned feeling of insufficiency, inadequacy, inferiority. Because that's what we were when we were little and couldn't do a thing. Everybody else around us could do things which we couldn't. We couldn't even sit up. In the beginning, not even turn our head, walk. And often when we began to do things, don't do this. So why wouldn't every one of us grow up with this feeling of inferiority? Because at the age, they say already around the age of 2, there's the highest learning capacity in this brain. Imitating, learning. Learning about, quote unquote, oneself, what one is, according to what the others say one is. Good girl, bad boy. So all of this sort of is underlying programming or conditioning wired throughout this body, what we are and should be and shouldn't be. Feeling judged, and the rewardingness or the painfulness of it is learned very early and remembered in this body-mind with its incredible capacity to remember, form memory connections. We used to say traces, but today it's more how the neurons interconnect, thickening of synapses. The more one goes over the thing, or the more the same thing happens, the thicker the connection, and they're more likely to occur again. So, in judging today, to just sort of listen in, tune in. Does it feel good? It happens so often, there has to be a lot of tuning in, because judgmentalness may pervade one's daily life, for better or worse, ups and downs. Is there a need to do it to feel one's existence, one's worthwhile existence, overlaying this other wiring of insufficiency and inadequacy? You may feel, aren't you getting to be too psychological here? No, we're not talking about theory, we're talking about watching what goes on and suggesting something that is observed to be happening, to watch it in oneself. The habit of knowing and judging, and needing to know and needing to judge, to keep confirming one's existence as somebody worthwhile, somebody important. It's, again, offered for consideration, not just thinking about it, but discovering it as we go. Because there's a real neat function in discussing, talking, meeting, dialoguing, looking, questioning, that there's a greater likelihood of something coming into view in our daily, moment-to-moment relationships, which before was so dark, so unconscious, so automatic, so close and yet so far from attention. And again, let us just remind ourselves, it's not a matter of I must not be judging, I should be free from judging or get rid of it or overcome it. These are all conventional ways of thinking, programmed into the mind. What is not programmed into the mind is this possibility of seeing, discovering. It's always fresh, always new, this instant. Listening to the wind and the trees, the sound of it. So present that there is no need to confirm oneself as a separate existence, able to judge it. Sometimes people say, quite often actually, I seem to get close to something and then there's a fear of losing myself, of disappearing. What is one afraid of losing? This one who is able to know and to judge, meaning the functioning of the mind in its habitual, conditioned ways, reactive ways, very likely reacting, to feelings of inferiority. Is a fear of losing this whole mind network which we think is our existence, which we believe in. This is me. This is what I am. All that I can think about myself and remember and anticipate. And what people have told me I am. This conviction that this is what I really am. The network, memories, associations, thought processes, judgments, pictures, of course. It's not a story without pictures. And yet, people report that sometimes just for an instant at a time, things drop away. There is no cocoon, no enclosure, no feeling of separation. The wind is blowing, the leaves are rustling, the voice is going, and so is the breathing. No one doing it, no one having it, and no fear of losing anything because everything is here. Can you hear it? Not I am hearing it. That's a way of talking conventionally. There's sound and rustling and breathing and sensing and presence with it all. Without any need to identify oneself as the perceiver or the judge, or the knower for that matter. Hearing the leaves rustling needs no knowing, does it? It's just rustling. And the word is not what's going on. And then thought comes in and knows it from past experiences and words and memories, knowledge. That's thought production, which follows this first instant of pure perception. Before it is known or judged, or liked or disliked. Let's move on to forgiveness. Forgiving. Somebody asked us yesterday in a group, is there some kind of a practice? And let me say this, I think I haven't said it yet in retreat. I never ever remember what people say verbatim. Don't have this kind of a memory. So I'm using my own words now. But usually I get the gist of it. If I don't, I ask the person to say some more so I can really get it, understand it. But then when it comes back out in a talk, it may not be precisely the question that somebody asked. Also because very often in a retreat, different people ask very similar questions, so they sort of become fused. Just saying this, so one doesn't get the feeling that one wasn't heard or properly quoted. if the meaning was really distorted by the way I'm putting it today, please bring it up again in a meeting and we'll take it up and look at it freshly. So, is there some kind of a practice that one could engage in to begin to forgive oneself? Forgive others too, but for this particular person, the important thing was to forgive oneself. And here, maybe from the very beginning, we can point out that we are moving with this question in the network of me and my guilt, my wrongdoings in the past, my guilt, and my desire for being done with it, no longer carrying this pain of guilt about what I did in the past to others, to myself. In this question, there is not yet any clarification about what this I is that wishes to forgive what? Itself. It's not clear, is it? We're talking conventionally the way we have learned to talk and think about ourselves and each other, in very abstract, detached ways. By detached, I mean separate from what is really going on. As I do something, or something is done here, which is later regretted. It has caused harm, sickness, confusion, pain, guilt. What is happening at such a moment? We're not aware. Later on, we say, I did such and such a thing, and I shouldn't have. Although very often the mind goes into action to justify what we do, what we did, to explain it, to rationalize it, so as not to feel guilty. Somebody else really made me do it. And here, what a marvelous thing is happening, or at least potentially happening, that we can look at these things in a new way. Not go with a conventional way of thinking about ourselves and each other and all that comes out of this thinking. Guilt and remorse and atonement and forgiveness. But to begin to understand a human being right here, observable. Because with quiet sitting, quiet looking and questioning and listening and wondering, suddenly, as well as little by little, comes a growing transparency of what takes place in this body-mind. Not talking about it in abstractions, but watching it directly as it happens, or as it maybe has happened a little while ago. Very often the attention is not there, the awareness is not there, as thoughts go into action. Do we realize that most of our actions, or let's rather say reactions, come from thoughts? And not to agree with it or to disagree with it, but put it there like a hypothesis and try to see, is this so? We think there is someplace an I in here, a me, a thinker, and a doer, an actor, thinking about something and then deciding to act on it. Some sort of a separate and quite stable, hopefully permanent, many people think, entity, me, I, which initiates things, has free choice to act this way or that way, to think this way or that way, to take responsibility. So here is a possibility to track down this actor, this doer, this thinker. Or, let's put it more tentatively, is there such a thing as a doer, a thinker, an actor? We'll leave the soul aside. It's too complicated. Not really. Go find it and show it to yourself and to me, the soul. So, we already touched upon it lightly yesterday in watching how, did we talk about this on groups? How one thought translates itself into upset, angry upset, or fearful upset, yearning desires. A thought connecting with the physical organism, getting it to move, to the organs to move, the glands to pour out all kinds of juices, the muscles to tense or to relax. And it happens so quickly. Thinking of something I did and instantly the pain, the guilt. Or thinking of something somebody did to me, instantly the anger or hurt. Test it. Watch it. Maybe at this moment of just listening there isn't much in the mind. But it is possible to listen to a talk and look at the same time. That's what I'm doing. Talking and looking at the same time is possible. So we were asking yesterday, where in this almost instantaneous connection of thought and physiology, thought and heart beginning to beat because I just thought of something I forgot to do, and boom, boom, boom. Heart is getting the body ready to do this thing, even though sitting here or lying in bed there is no action yet, so it feels uncomfortable, this heart beating. And one wanted to sleep, and instead of the body is pervaded with energy to do this thing which one has just thought about. But where in all of this is the me if we don't think me and just watch what's happening? Because we have no other way of expressing it but saying, well, I had a thought, and then I felt this heart pounding, and I felt really an urge to do this thing, to get up and write that letter, or whatever. Or can, without trying to be artificial or affected, to say there was a thought occurred, it was perceived, and instantly it was perceived, the heart beating and energy arousing, and an urge to write that letter. He's not trying to pussyfoot around the I, but to express what is being observed. And I say what is being observed because I have not found an observer. There's just awareness. Not I am aware, but awareness of wind and words. So, coming back to forgiveness, that's where we start. A memory arises or lots of memories of things done in the past by this body-mind, or so we think. The consequences of it, the pain, the hurt caused by the words and actions emanating from here. Hurting wife, hurting children, hurting co-workers, oneself. And the body, at this memory, feeling a certain pain or contraction, discomfort, which we call guilt. It's not just the discomfort and contraction, it's also more thoughts. I shouldn't have done this. How terrible of me. And embedded in such self-judging thoughts is also fear of punishment. I don't know how each one of us grew up. I just recently saw an incredible, in detail, public television presentation of Michelangelo's Last Judgment. I don't know if any of you saw that thing. I used to study Michelangelo a lot. I had a tremendous affinity to his creations. But never ever have I seen in such detail that Last Judgment. They were also, at the time, they were pointing these things, there were restorers at work, taking off some things that had been superimposed later on in later centuries. For instance, loincloths around genitals. The restorer removed this, and here you saw what was there, put there by Michelangelo. And one was really quite a revelation. One sinner, when the loincloth was removed, there was a snake there biting into the genitals. It had been covered. But covered or not, we have heard all kinds of stories in our childhood about what will happen to us if we haven't heard it, we've read it. Heard it in church. Who has grown up without any cause and effect relationship between what you do and what will happen to you? So this fear of punishment is embedded in the feeling of guilt, isn't it? I've sometimes played with this because I grew up with lots of guilt. It was a tool of education in my family, of bringing up, which my parents, particularly my mother, had learned from her family, and on and on and on. Always feeling guilty about something and passing it on to somebody else. Making them feel guilty, sort of as a way of manipulating each other. So, I know all about guilt feelings. And sometimes I've played with it and thought, what if really absolutely nobody would find out about this? Would I still feel guilty? And in many cases, surprising answer was no, I wouldn't feel guilty. So it has to do with being found out and punished. Although I'm not saying this is all the time, because there is a real genuine sorrow or sorriness in us about having hurt what we've all of us who have had children have done to our children. Unwittingly, unknowingly, sometimes thinking we're doing the right thing, but sometimes just acting from reaction embedded since our childhood. How we were reacted to is now how we react to the child. Before we know it, it comes out so quickly. And so potentially or actually hurtfully. And reflecting back on it, how sorry one is that this had to happen this way, and that there wasn't more freedom from this reactiveness this is how I often put it, having a child is really a precious opportunity for a second growing up, to reveal all this reactiveness programmed into oneself, and with sufficient interest and awareness not passing it on when it is, unreasonable. I don't mean pulling a child away from a burning fire or something. So, there is not just fear of punishment or being found out, but also feeling genuinely sorry or sad about what was said or done or reacted. Does it help to feel genuinely sad and sorry? It helps to a certain degree if one tells the person one has heard, I'm sorry about this. I'm really sorry. Hug each other. If the other person so inclined may not be interested in any hugs at all. And is it also genuine or just a gesture? One wants to get it over with and says, I'm sorry. We were all taught. I don't know whether you were. We were taught to have to say, I'm sorry, when we didn't feel the least bit sorry. Just had to do it or else we'd be sorry. So now, is there a practice? And I have a notion, I've never engaged in forgiveness practices, but I'm sure there are lots of different practices suggested or invented by people to help out with this problem. I'm not interested in practices to ameliorate a pain. What will really be the essence of dropping it or forgiving? I don't even have a real feeling for forgiving, because who forgives whom? When we say, I have to forgive myself, no, I have to understand what goes on in reactiveness, in guilt feelings, in carrying things around. And by carrying things around that we'll feel sorry and guilty for, we're still not present now, this moment of interrelating, and maybe just as reactive because we're not attentive. We're preoccupied with past stuff. The past stuff is like a wrap, wrapped up like a mummy, and not able to respond freshly to this moment, which may not be what we're sorry for in the past, but it's a fresh moment, needing a fresh response, not clouded by regrets carried around. So, what will drop this whole baggage? Past doings, past guilt, and the desire for forgiveness. Don't we need some insight into something other than this network in which all of this takes place? We live, you and I, human beings everywhere since time immemorial, we live in something like a spider web. Me at the center of this web as the spider. Something taps the web and immediately the spider moves to wrap it up, make it its own, eat it up, spare it, not spare it, store it for the future. And yet, all around the spider web there is empty space. Spider web itself is empty space, but full of guide wires and stickiness, caught upness, catching others in it, and oneself stuck in the middle. So is there anything else? This is why what one comes here to, the question may not be so clear, defined, and yet doesn't one come here to maybe be free for a moment from all the nitty-gritty of one's daily life, the stickiness, the caught-upness, the reactiveness, the overwork, etc. The lack of breathing space, lack of space. Freedom from time, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We have distorted notions of what we are. And we'll go into that after tomorrow. The responsibility will come later. It's a difficult subject. But can we begin to question our distorted ideas of what we are and the attachment to these ideas? For fear of losing it, for fear of disappearing, we cling to these ideas about ourselves. Can we become aware of it and wonder about it? Whether these ideas of what we are, which manifest in reactiveness, defensiveness, aggressiveness, what we want to be or would love to be, and don't want others to be, the whole 9 yards, can we question it as being the only thing there is? Because this is how we live, as though it was the only thing there is. See whether we can listen without knowing. Not knowing what else there could be. It's not knowable. The spider web is knowable in all of its intricacies. But whether there's something beside that we don't know. But no one can keep us from questioning what one truly is, what this world, what you, what everything truly is in its very essence, its very depth. Start with not knowing. It's a beautiful way to start anything. We will end here for today. had a response to it. She had her faith in her Bible or whatever it was called for her. And of course she perished. But there again, the faith was blind to the situation. This man could have saved her, but this was not from the... Yeah, of course, yeah. A few years later, natural death maybe, or... But it was so beautifully shown, the curtains coming down. You know what to do, you know what to believe, what responses, ritualistic responses to engage in against all the evidence.
Okay, but how does that differ from, I mean, second guessing, of course, what's going on inside this woman, of, the interrupted life. I forget her name,
Etty Hillesum.
Yeah. Who also refused to be saved. She had many chances to be saved.
But that was a different thing for her. The way I read it from her book. Yeah, she didn't want to abandon her people.
It's also second guessing this woman.
Yes.
There for this woman and her religious practice. Just because someone has a religious practice doesn't deny the fact that their experience of homeless. I mean, it's almost like saying because somebody has a religious practice, they're not experiencing homeless because it's an idea or something.
Well, we can examine it, maybe only for ourselves, for sure. Because actually Etty Hillesum, since you brought her up, also had ideas that she should not abandon her people. It's also an idea. But to save myself is also an idea. Myself is an idea. So how can we get out of this? Is there a way out of all ideas?
I think sometimes there's a faith that happens between people that at least starts that way. Probably most of us here have had the experience of meeting somebody that we thought seems to know something we don't know. We listen to them and we get the feeling, I think I understood maybe 80%, maybe 50%. There's something I don't know that I feel a need to know. It's kind of a faith. It's not a faith in really knowing where you're going with it, but the faith is almost like an intuition, something like a desire. Maybe the difference between some Zen koans and James Joyce. You read Finnegan's Wake and you go, well, gee, it's a lot of words put together. It's interesting, it's creative, and I'm getting bored now. I'm going to shut up. At least I did. I actually did read the dumb thing, but something koans you read,
Something?
Yeah, you read a Zen koan and you go, oh, I didn't understand that. And read it to a friend of yours and go, why are you reading that? And yet you might say to yourself, well, I have respect for the person who wrote it. I think it's relating to something that's important if I can understand it. What's going on here? I don't know, but there's a feeling that keeps you pressed to it.
Yeah.
Or when someone you have respect for, you're taken as a teacher, tells you something. And first you go, oh, yes, I understand that completely. Then you go home and go, not only didn't I understand it completely, I just glossed it over because I was afraid of my own lack of understanding. Now it's quiet, open it up again. I understand what was meant by that. And there's a faith that I think keeps us persevering towards something. Maybe it comes from an experience as well. Maybe a dialogue between faith and experience, where I remember, this is quite a few years ago when I was in college, first real girlfriend that we were in love, and did everything together, and went upstairs and laid down on my bed at my parents' house, and we were studying together, and nothing erotic about this. We just both had our books piled on there, and like two kids that age, we kind of wound ourselves around each other a little bit, still reading, and then both fell asleep. I remember waking up just very gently and realizing I was awake. I looked down at both of us and at pile of books, and I guess the bed too. And there was a sense that I didn't end with my body. I didn't know where her body ended and mine began. I didn't even know where the books ended and I began. And it was a very odd experience. And it lasted for a period of time, I don't know, a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And slowly we started to move, and it seemed to evaporate. But I was left with just an odd experience, with no faith at all of anything. Because I knew what I was. I was this body, and this was my girlfriend Debbie. And these were our philosophy books. I knew what all these things are. And in that knowing, the experience seemed to evaporate. But then, several years later, you have somebody just show you the most mundane thing. Hand you a pencil. So what is this? You realize that question had more to it than, oh, that's a pencil. And here I can draw with it. Sure. That I'm being led to something somehow, or there's some understanding that, then I remember certain experiences and say, wait a minute, what am I resisting here? What am I trying to hold on to? What am I afraid of letting go of? And have I actually, in fact, let go of it before and not even known that it was letting go? And I think that dialogue between faith and experience, it's not a big faith. It's not faith in God. It's not faith in this idea or that idea. But a faith that I'm not seeing something, and that there is something to be seen, and does that make sense?
Sort of like the third pillar that we couldn't remember, isn't it doubt? Great question.
Yeah.
I wonder if faith is something unnameable and not necessarily from some great experience, but just the experience of just that there's life and breathing and trees growing and people, and so it's just this life that I feel. And so I can say, well, no, I don't have faith in anything. And yet there is this life. And so, yes, if I want to say that there's basic faith and maybe belief that that's all it has to be. But I can say that just from my experience of being alive. And aware of life around.
So in a sense you're saying, from your experience and from the evidence, there's something, somehow you're imbued with a certain optimism or a certain, something's positive about that whole situation.
Not even
About life in general. There's something imbued in life that's perhaps open and uplifting, as opposed to something intrinsic that's saying this isn't going to work out. This is doomed. There's something intrinsic here that makes us say, let's get up and do it again.
I don't know, because I might be depressed and, negative and think, oh, it's terrible, it's not worth it, and people are dying, and yet there's still this aliveness here, that I might not even be looking at, but it's still felt and experienced. And, I can easily get covered up with these other, experiences of terrible things and depression, but it's still there, still here.
Maybe what you're saying is, why formulate it into anything? I have faith, or I have this or that. Just as you described it, as simple as possible. Maybe depression, maybe negativity, sickness, and yet at the same time, what?
It's interesting to me. If you think that depression or negativity would cause you to question, why wouldn't we do the same thing over being elated or very positive?
We didn't talk about elation. I didn't hear.
No, we didn't. But
Frank, yeah.
it's just that,
You're just saying that.
yeah, it's just that we tend to think, and I think truly this is a thought thing, that it's the negative, if you have a belief and negative things happen, that would contradict. But if positive things happen, it wouldn't. And yet, what's the difference?
Both of them are formulations away from what's really happening.
Yes, both are formulations away from what's really happening.
Yeah.
Or both of them are just going on and we interpret it. Like
Yes.
earlier this week I was very depressed. Only instead of going, well, I'm depressed, there's something wrong, I went, okay, I'm depressed, what's going on? What's happening? And looked at it as, well, maybe there were some reasons for it, and maybe it's a call to examine and change, but not necessarily saying, okay, being depressed is automatically bad, which seems to me what really happens is we have an experience and we put a label on it. And we can then do whatever, then we start getting away from it becomes ideas.
And we're suffering from the label.
We suffer from the idea, not necessarily from the experience that's really happening. And we can take that also as evidence or non-evidence, whatever. And that's a quote-unquote internal state. We can do the same thing with external circumstances, which may or may not be where also we can be deceived. Like they're visual things where you can look at the picture of the goblet of the faces, which is it? There's one of these pictures where you can look at it one way and it's two goblins. If you look at it another way, it's two faces.
Right.
Which is it?
Can you hold so still and you're looking that it's both goblets and faces? And also neither of them. There, it's just the empty seeing, looking. Being, that's what Frank was. Sort of empty being. Aliveness, depressedness. The being of it. See, the moment we do words,
you put it into words.
But it doesn't have to take you away. The word does not have to take you away. It can, but it needn't. If you're there, then the words are sort of just our ways of communicating, sharing.
I'm having trouble holding on to it. Or maybe you didn't say this, or maybe you didn't. I got the labels and da-da-da. So how does that relate to faith? I mean, is faith present in, or is it just...
Is faith a label? Or is it a manifestation of fundamental experience? It could be either.
Well, we can look at it right now. Is it either?
It could be either, because if you've had this fundamental experience of non-duality, whatever you want to call it, it can underpin one's being all and much of the time.
What can underpin one's being?
This experience.
As what? As an actuality?
As an actuality, yes.
Well, then it's not underpinning it. It is
Yes.
one's
Right.
existence. Yeah.
But
And in that, where is the faith, or the doubt, or the ambition?
right.
Excuse me.
That's in the actual experiencing of it. Then all those drop away.
Irrelevant, yeah.
But one doesn't necessarily stay in that place. And so then, at other times, is faith a matter of the knowledge, this knowledge, which is in some sense an idea, because you're not experiencing it, or is it something where you've been told something, or you have a hope for something?
Yeah. Or has it some direct lifeline to what has been directly experienced?
Of course, in one sense, you could say that we've all had that experience. It may have happened before we did a lot of conceptual thinking.
But how do we know that it isn't there for all of us right now?
What's it?
Well, what word to put to it? The ground. True ground, true being, bare being. Frank was talking about that. How? It's because we talk about, well, I had that experience, but right now I don't have it. What makes us say that? A lack of pausing and listening? Just thinking I don't have it? Because one doesn't usually have that.
Yes, it's like when you listen to the radio, if you change the dial, you change the frequency, but that station that you were listening to before is still there.
Still there.
You just changed the frequency.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's what we do. We change frequencies all of the time, and we tune into some things and we tune out of other things, but they're all there.
Yeah.
Or
Maybe
is there,
Go ahead. Maybe what we shift into is thinking that there's a separate self who had that experience, rather than that we are being. I mean, how bare can we get with that?
Even a separate self who just didn't have an experience. Oh, I wasn't thinking that. Well, I wasn't thinking that. What did I just create?
Or what was just created?
Yeah.
So is that why we don't question the positive stuff, feeling positive? Because it is simply the background in which this other negative stuff comes up, what we call negative, or what we question. But we're going to take it for granted, this
The good stuff we take.
the background, or what we basically are. Maybe it's just simply what we basically are.
That is what we basically are, either positive or negative, or does it include both? It seems to me when I am feeling, when I'm an I, a gene, if something positive comes up, I like it. So why would I question out of that? But if something negative comes up, the tendency is to want it to go away. So it really gets my attention more than the positive. But it feels like both the positive and the negative come from a separate sense of self, which doesn't seem to be real. I mean, it's sort of a separate sense of self is overlaid on being, is the word I keep coming back to just because it
what creates this separate sense of self?
Pardon?
What creates the separate sense of self?
As far as I can see, thinking.
A strong faith in the
No.
reality of those thoughts.
All right, okay, a conditioned belief, if you will, that those thoughts are real.
Supported by evidence.
Recorded evidence, memory evidence.
By recorded plenty of evidence, or interpreted evidence. Yeah.
Which is also conditioning, isn't it?
Right, not the ones you're
Maybe the thing that keeps us from the unconditioned being is intentions. When we were walking around looking at this plant, I didn't say, oh, that's a plant, such and such a name. I don't know its name.
Could you speak a little bit?
I didn't know the name of the plant. I saw the sun hitting the plant, and it was beautiful, and there was a sense of, very intense sense of being aware of it. It was surprising, it was there, I kept walking. I didn't label it right away, but in a sense I did, by saying, well, I didn't, experience was not a labeling of a beautiful plant hanging from a wall and all these things. It was just there, it was there. I didn't ask for it, I had no intention of it. I was just walking. And it's like looking out a window and seeing a tree or a hawk or a deer that you don't expect. Before we call it a deer, before we recognize it, there seems to be, the first experience is just a delight, an awareness which brings an intense joy, at least for me with deer. And but usually we have intentions that keep us from it, it seems.
What are these intentions?
Want me to make the list?
I mean, Jean
Yeah.
says all of the stuff, it seems to me, comes out of the sense of a separate self, you said it a while ago. And
Yeah.
how does this relate to intentions?
I think that part of how we define ourselves is, or define that self, is a whole series of intentions, which then we have to do. We have to think about them. Maybe thinking is part of what that intention is. We've got to think about this, we've got to think about that. So much of it is maintenance of that self-image. That maybe some people might even be frustrated when they see a plant because they don't know its name. I used to feel like that. I taught nature studies. I'd hike through the woods, and if I ran across a plant that I didn't recognize, I had to go back and look that up in a book. I couldn't just look at it. That being Frank was talking about, that living, seems like it's always there, but without, as soon as I decide I have to do something, it gets glazed over.
So can you do something without I deciding that I have to do something? That goes back to this man who had no leisure in his work. Is it possible doing things without, not that the things one does begin to define me as somebody who has to do it, who's doing it well, not doing it well. Doing without self-definition. Without, intention. We intend to build something, to do something, dig for dinosaurs. Is this always an intention? Or does it at times happen without self-definition? Just the joy of digging. I don't know, I've never done it, but I can imagine it.
Yeah, that's what brings you back to, is that...
To what?
Maybe I'm just so thick-headed, I have to go out to Montana to have some of these experiences, but when you go to all that effort and finally you're just you in the dirt, and then it isn't beautiful anymore, because when you find something, you get just a moment, at least, where you pick that thing up. It's a whole world. And usually somebody comes over, takes it out of your hand, and the discussion starts.
But even holding it in the hand has a big thing, a context too, because a child picking this up without knowing this is 100 million or however long time span, that adds to the wonder, doesn't it?
Oh, it adds to
Yeah.
it.
I'm not saying it's wrong.
No. Sometimes that the most intense experiences don't have to be defined. There's some places where you expect them to happen, though, at least for me. I'm digging somewhere and come up with a big tooth about 3 or 4 inches long and look at it. Wow, I don't know who it is or what it is, but there is the little kid inside me who doesn't really know much of what this is at all. And it's delightful, but what's even more surprising is when that happens in everyday life. And
Digging up the dinosaur.
well,
100 million years old habits, huh?
but when you're walking along and like I say, in the woods you see a flower, just about to walk past it. And, wait a minute, why am I walking past this flower? Oh, because I have intentions. I've got to go do this. I've got to go find these dinosaurs. Got to become famous. Got to impress all sorts of people. And of course, this flower isn't going to impress anybody. And, I can't dig it up, and I'm not a botanist. And yet, all those thoughts kind of slowly grind up. Oh, because you're standing there looking at the flower. And at this moment, what's being discovered is the experience of this flower. And that's what that moment, this moment, is. And it's not less important than the one that might send shockwaves through the world of paleontology. It's this flower. They've never seen it before. That's even a thought.
But in that experience with the flower, we look at the flower and we get a certain amount of joy from it. But that experience in itself doesn't have the power to heal us deeply. I mean, if we're walking through our lives in this kind of being ill at ease and not experiencing this joy that maybe is a part of the substrate of existence, of being, then what heals us? I mean, what takes, we've been torn apart from, and we can experience some pleasure from the flower, but then that experience is gone.
It's not so much the seeing the flower as the dropping of the self.
Well, maybe it's simply seeing the intention. There is, I can see that. I mean,
But
I don't have to
experience-
say I have the intention, but what I get sick and tired of is seeing the mind doing the same thing over and over and over again.
So what heals us?
Seeing that moment, what is healing? Is it something really big?
Isn't it?
It's happened.
How do we live our
if
lives?
you can see, if the seeing of this ancient habit is there in that second, there's healing, isn't there?
Is there? I mean, do we walk away healed?
What do you mean healed? Perfect? No. Yes.
Or do we
Yes.
carry on this same routine day after day after day? We have this experience of understanding that we've carried this baggage, and yet the next day it's the same old baggage.
Same
That's
old
because it's
stuff.
understanding, and I don't think she's not talking about understanding. I don't think you are. She's not talking about understanding, she's talking about just that, there are those moments when you actually, there's this I think what Joan calls them somatic experiences or something. In her books, it's like this experience. It's not like understanding. It's not like seeing. I've done this forever and ever. And this comes out of this and blah blah blah. It's just this, full seeing.
Direct seeing of this incredible need of the self, of the mind to continue, not to end, for sure not. There is an incredible energy in the wanting to continue, and seeing that, just being in touch with that first, in a split second or a second. I mean, what else? What else? What else is there? What else possibilities are there?
It's the seeing.
what other possibilities are there? There seem this
Yeah.
incredible desire
Ultimate healing, what
to
does that
continue
mean?
on.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think there are a whole lot more possibilities than
more than that.
that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm curious to hear from you. What you have in mind.
Maybe you don't quite understand. What do you have in mind when you say there are more? What do you think her possibility is? I mean, or what are the more possibilities? I mean, on what one can see, or different possibilities other than seeing? Or do you mean that all kind of different stuff that can be seen and discovered? I don't think you would argue with that.
Mm-mm.
But what were you onto there? A whole lot of more.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is, so we discuss this stuff, and we can say, maybe it's some kind of unconditioned seeing. Maybe we have this experience and we can relate to this experience. And yet we say all this stuff, and the next day we put ourselves through the same routine.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we do. I mean, yeah.
Maybe it happens, you know. Maybe there's just, maybe that's, I mean, that's the suffering, you know. We do it. Is that true? I mean, that's the suffering. That's the pain.
Okay, somehow I
Thinking that we do this, you know, that we do this. That's the pain. You know, that's the horror. Doesn't it just, I mean, is that true? Do we do this? Or do we stop this?
do it. Apparently not.
Well, what's the we? Or the I?
An individual, do I? I mean,
Are you doing this?
so I can discuss this, I can have a pleasant experience, I can get a sense that there's something else going on, and yet ultimately the routine continues.
Where does it continue?
Right here,
And what is here?
this moment.
What is this moment in which all this continues? Not focusing so much on the stuff that continues, but this moment.
Mm-hmm. So I bring to this moment whatever. This bag of knots, this
Bag of knots of habits is rolling and unfurling and unfolding and defolding. They're doing all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Habits, doing the same thing over and over, Marlies talking about. Where is it happening? You say here. Well, what is here? And see that this dual focus, or either focusing on the stuff and oh my God, here I'm doing it again, or letting it be in space, which is what you are. Now, I don't mean conceptually, but actually.
Letting it be what?
In space, in emptiness, which is what we are. All of the stuff rattling around in emptiness. Now, this is not a concept, even though it is conceptualizable. It is true, it is so. This chair here, we were talking about it yesterday in Rochester, this chair, you feel so solid. But there's no disagreement, I'm sure, anymore among scientists that this is also empty space, no matter how solid it feels. Galactic space among the particles and stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is not just calculatable and imaginable, but it is experienceable. That all the junk and stuff and habit takes place in space, in emptiness, the moment a shift happens from the stuff to just being. The throbbing of being. And even that is too many words, but we're talking with each other. And that is whole. Same as healing. Holing. This is holing. It's not even holing, it's whole. not a black hole. No seams, no borders, no top or bottom. And the reason there is so much energy in this is that for the time being, the energy isn't all tied up in separate sense of self. That's what maybe Marlies was hinting at there. The moment something is seen, there's the energy that ties all of this up is released for a moment to just being, seeing.
And kind of recognizing over and over that those are all reactions. That's a reactive thing triggered by something. That there's really not much question of decision or choice or whatever. That this is just an ongoing happening of things being triggered, reactions. And I don't know. I think you talk about healing. I don't know. I don't think I experience that. What I do see is that with more seeing, with more attention, that the habits may become less rigid or less forceful, or they may drop off a little bit. Maybe that's some kind of healing, I don't know. But I'm not sure if it's ever going to end.
You're not sure what?
If it's ever going to end, as long as
This
there's
suffering?
breath and heart. So,
Well, I just read in Newsweek that galaxies are constantly colliding and creating new stars.
the soup is cooking, it's 12:30. The soup is being cooked. It's 12:30. Sit down, feel that. I'll take my chair. Oh, you take it?
I'd like to stay here. Oh, that's fine. Cool.
But it's too many, one goes there. Because that's a door. Yeah. So that one, on this one, and